I used to believe family could bend without ever breaking until the moment I realized someone I raised had started treating my future like an open account she could draw from. If you've ever faced a line you never thought family would cross, tell me your story in the comments. Emily stood at the entrance of the Baptist church in Charlotte, blocking my path before I could step through the double doors. Her hand lifted as if she were stopping a stranger, not her father. "Dad, this ceremony has no place for you." The words landed hard. Derek lingered a few steps behind her, flanked by 2 members of his family. None of them met my eyes, as though my presence might spark something they didn't want to get involved in. A breath settled in my chest while searching for a steady tone. "Emily, what's going on? Why would you say that?" She didn't hesitate. "Things changed. It's better if you turn around." No explanation. No sign she wanted a conversation. Her shoulders stiffened the way they used to when she was a teenager, hiding a failing grade. The difference now was the certainty in her voice, a certainty sharpened by someone else's influence. My gaze drifted past her toward the small gathering forming near the front rows. My grandson rested in the arms of a relative I barely knew. I'd imagined this day so many times, standing close enough to hear his breath, placing a hand on his back during the blessing. That picture slipped away in an instant, replaced by the cold realization that I had been pushed out before I even understood the reason. One attempt at reconnecting rose up softer than I intended. "Emily, you don't need to do this. If something's wrong, we can talk after the service." Her jaw tightened. "No. Please leave Dad." A few members of the congregation paused near the walkway. Their expressions carried questions I had no interest in answering. Staying any longer would have turned the moment into a scene neither of us needed, so I stepped back. Emily lowered her hand, but kept her stance as if waiting to see whether I'd argue. The drive toward Lake Norman stretched longer than usual. Traffic rolled by without pulling me into it. Thoughts crashed forward instead. Recent withdrawals from my business account, a request for shared access Emily had tried filing at the bank, and Marcus's quiet warning that something didn't add up. At the time, I brushed it aside, thinking he might be overreacting. He'd seen families tear themselves apart over money, but mine wasn't like that. At least that's what I believed. Memories of our last conversation replayed. "Richard, you should monitor your accounts more carefully," Marcus had said. His tone held concern, not suspicion, but the hesitation in his eyes suggested he suspected more than he wanted to say. The driveway came into view, and a dark SUV sat near the porch as if it belonged there. That alone unsettled me. No visitors were expected, and Emily never arrived unannounced. The front door wasn't even fully shut. A thin gap remained enough to suggest someone had rushed through without thinking. A knot formed in my stomach while stepping over the threshold. Voices drifted from the dining area. Emily's tone carried a forced calm, the kind she used whenever she wanted to sound reasonable while doing something unreasonable. Derek murmured something in response, and papers rustled. They all froze when I entered the room. My financial folders sat spread across the table: bank statements, retirement accounts, tax records, documents I kept in a locked drawer. Standing near them was a woman in her late 50s, dressed neatly, holding a clipboard covered with tabs. Emily recovered first. "Dad, we were just reviewing a few documents. We're worried about your mental stability, so we thought it might help to organize things." The words didn't match the scene. Her fingers hovered over my signature page as though she'd been studying it before I walked in. Derek shifted his weight, avoiding eye contact. The woman beside him offered a thin smile that didn't soften anything. A steady breath helped settle the surge rising through my chest. "How did you get my key? And why are you going through personal files without asking?" Emily shot a look at Derek, as if urging him to speak. He stepped forward. "We meant well, Richard. Your finances are complex. If something happened to you, nobody would know how to handle them. We're trying to make sure your future stays protected. Protected. A word people throw around when they want control. The legal assistant cleared her throat. We were simply assessing what might be needed should your daughter take a more supportive role. Nothing in her expression suggested doubt about their right to be here. Emily folded her arms in a way that signaled she'd prepared for this moment, rehearsed for it even. My voice stayed even. You had no permission to enter my home. None of you. Put everything back where it belongs and leave. Emily's brows tightened. Dad, please don't make this harder. You haven't been yourself lately. Derek added, We found a few inconsistencies in your spending. Just small things, but worth checking. Hearing that confirmed what I suspected. They had been looking for leverage long before today. The assistant began closing her folder, though she moved slowly, lingering on each sheet as if memorizing it. Emily hesitated, wanting to argue, yet Derek nudged her gently. He must have sensed the ground slipping beneath them. They backed away from the table. Emily whispered something to the assistant, who nodded and walked toward the door. Derek mumbled a half-hearted apology that meant nothing. Before leaving, Emily glanced at me with a mixture of pity and impatience. You really should let us help. You don't see what we see. No answer came from me. Watching them file out of the house drained whatever shock lingered, leaving behind a cold clarity. Their behavior wasn't impulsive or emotional. It was structured, planned. The moment the SUV rolled away, my phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. You all right? He asked as soon as I picked up. There were people in my house, I said. Emily, Derek, and a woman from a law office. They had my files out on the table. He let out a low exhale. I tried to reach you earlier. The bank flagged a few attempts from Emily to gain access. She said she was assisting her elderly parent with account management. The phrasing hit me like another blow. Emily knew exactly which words triggered institutional concern. Marcus continued. I checked their financial background after our last talk. They're overloaded with debt, business loans, credit cards, even a pending lien. If they're digging into your assets, it's not about care. They're hunting a lifeline. A long silence followed while processing it. He had no reason to exaggerate. Marcus always chose his words with care. This isn't just family conflict anymore, he added. They're crossing legal boundaries. You need to protect yourself. The conversation ended with a promise to meet at the bank the next morning. The house felt different once the call ended. Not darker, just shifted like the foundation of the life I'd built had been nudged out of alignment. Sitting at the dining table, I gathered the scattered documents and slid them back into their folders. My hand steadied with each page. Sorting through them forced me to confront a truth I'd been dodging. Love could never justify this level of intrusion. Marcus held the door as we stepped into his office at the bank. He kept his tone even though a hint of urgency sat beneath each word. Come with me. You need to see something before we talk options. A conference table stood near the back, covered with printouts he had arranged earlier. He handed over the first document without preamble. That's the petition Emily filed. She's asking the court for full control of your assets due to alleged cognitive decline. The phrasing hit harder than I expected. Lines accusing me of forgetfulness, confusion, and impulsive spending sat on the page in thick, confident letters. Someone had guided her through each claim with precision. She wrote this. She signed it, Marcus said. Someone else framed the language. This isn't amateur work. Another sheet slid across the table. She attached old medical records, too. Nothing alarming, just notes from your surgery years ago, but they're using those to build a narrative. A pulse thudded in my temples. Emily had seen those files before, but she'd never treated them as ammunition. Something had shifted in her life long enough for her to forget how trust functions between family. Marcus tapped his laptop. There's more. A call came through last week from Derek. He pressured one of our junior employees to access your account activity and forward it to him. He hit play on an audio clip. The recording carried Derek's voice, measured but insistent. We're handling his affairs now. He won't notice if you send the report. It's important for his safety. The employee hesitated on the line, unsure, but Derek pressed harder until she relented. Hearing his manipulation spelled out without apology or doubt brought a cold heaviness over my shoulders. Marcus muted the audio. This fully violates policy. We've already flagged it, but you needed to hear it for yourself. A chair pulled me down before my knees gave out. The thought returned dull and persistent, that years of staying silent about my wants had carved a space Emily thought she could occupy freely. Maybe I had allowed her to assume I'd always step aside. Marcus sat beside me. Don't blame yourself. People act strangely when money troubles close in. They convince themselves they're rescuing the situation. An email notification chimed on my phone. Emily's name glowed on the screen. Against better judgment, I opened it. Dad, given everything happening, you should stop your business operations for now. Once the court resolves this, we can help you restructure things. Emily. The suggestion wasn't a suggestion. She wrote it as if the outcome was already settled, and my role was simply to comply. A new kind of exhaustion seeped through me, less from anger, more from the realization she no longer viewed me as capable. Marcus watched my face change. More pressure. She wants me to suspend the company. She's building a case, he said. Once your business looks unstable, she'll use it to justify intervention. By early afternoon, word of the petition must have traveled faster than I anticipated. One of my senior technicians, Mark Ellis, called while I stood near the lobby. Richard, someone came by the shop asking questions about you, wanted to know if you'd been making mistakes. Should we be concerned? My grip tightened around the phone. Who was it? No name given. Just said they needed background. It didn't feel right. The call drained whatever sense of normalcy I had left. Rumors cling easily in a small business. One whisper could unravel years of steady work. Returning to the conference room, a part of me wanted everything to stop. Handing Emily a portion of the estate crossed my mind. Let her have enough to calm down. Settle her problems. Remove the conflict from my life. Surrender almost sounded peaceful. Marcus read the hesitation spreading through me. You're thinking about giving in. Don't. He spoke gently, not as a banker protecting a client, but as someone who'd watched similar scenarios end badly. You need the full truth before you decide anything. If you give up now, you won't know how far they planned to go. Get clarity first. The firmness in his voice steadied me. The man had already risked pushing boundaries by investigating Derek's involvement. He wouldn't say this lightly. We went through the remaining forms, documented every irregularity, and created a list of questions for legal counsel. Marcus highlighted the timeline of attempted accesses to my accounts, 3 in the past month, all tied to Emily's requests. Your attorney needs to see this, he said. Set a meeting as soon as possible. I'll provide an internal statement regarding Derek's call. Leaving the bank, the late afternoon carried a chill that cut through my jacket. The parking lot stretched wide, though it felt strangely narrow, with everything closing in. Cars rolled past, unaware of the shift happening beneath my life. The elevator doors opened to the hallway outside my attorney's office. A receptionist ushered me toward a conference room where 2 folders had already been arranged neatly on the table. My attorney, Daniel Whitaker, motioned for me to sit as he adjusted his glasses. Richard reviewed the petition Emily filed, he began. The court rejected it immediately. You updated your will last week, which means her request doesn't match current records. A rush of relief passed through me. Yet it didn't erase the weight of why we were meeting in the first place. So she didn't know I'd changed it. No, Daniel replied. But she tried to support her claim with old medical files from your surgery years ago. She pulled selective notes, attached them as if they proved diminished memory. It's a stretch, but still concerning. The stack of papers he slid toward me contained familiar phrasing from past doctors, stripped of context. Emily had used them to frame me as someone losing his ability to manage daily life. Seeing her handwriting beneath those accusations stirred something more cutting than anger, disbelief that she'd gone this far. Daniel tapped the second folder. Now here's where things get complicated. The bank opened an internal review due to the unauthorized access attempts. To protect the institution, they froze your secondary business account until they finish investigating. The sentence hit harder than the first. That account covers vendor payments, I said. I know. And payroll, if I'm not mistaken. It's temporary, but it will delay your cash flow. A call buzzed through on my phone from the office manager at my company. He rarely contacted me during meetings. I stepped aside to answer. Richard, he said, our largest maintenance client needs confirmation of the funds before signing. With the delay, they don't want to risk it. They're backing out unless we can guarantee availability next week. Guaranteeing anything was impossible with the account frozen. Tell them I'll call back, I said, though the words tasted hollow. Returning to the table, Daniel read my expression before I spoke. You lost a contract, he said. A major one. He nodded slowly. This is fallout from their actions. You're already seeing the consequences. The meeting shifted into strategy. We outlined what the bank needed, what information Daniel would request, and what responses Emily might attempt next. He advised documenting every irregularity, every intrusion, and every communication. As he spoke, something in me sagged, not from defeat, but from the realization of how much damage had been done before I even reacted. Years of giving Emily space, stepping back whenever she seemed overwhelmed, raising her gently, so she wouldn't feel the loss of her mother too sharply. All of it had been mistaken for permission. Daniel closed his notebook. You're not powerless here, Richard, but you need to stay ahead of them. And stay calm. People in these situations often make mistakes when they're pushed emotionally. On the drive out of Uptown, a feeling grew, an odd mixture of exhaustion and clarity. A life can shift fast when someone decides you're easier to manage than to understand. I pulled into a gas station to collect myself, but the phone vibrated again. A text from my neighbor, Carol Richard. You need to get home. Derek and another man are in your garage. They're going through your things. I didn't want to confront them alone. Please come quickly. A beat passed before my lungs remembered how to move. Whatever patience remained in me snapped into urgency. The truck reversed from the space before the engine had fully settled, tires scraping slightly as I pulled onto the road. Thoughts pushed each other out of the way while heading toward Lake Norman. Derek had crossed far too many lines, already accessing bank information, guiding Emily into filing petitions, whispering warnings into the ears of my employees. Now he was at my house again, rummaging through my property as if entitled to it. The neighborhood came into view just as my pulse began to steady enough to think clearly. Carol stood near the end of her driveway, arms folded, worry etched across her face. She pointed toward my garage. They're still in there, she said. Thank you for letting me know, I replied, stepping out before she could say more. Derek jerked around when the garage door lifted. A man wearing a work shirt with a data recovery logo stood beside him, hunched over my old desktop tower. Wires trailed across the floor, connecting the machine to a laptop balanced on a stool. Derek raised both hands, as if he'd been caught doing something harmless. Richard. Hey, don't panic. We're only trying to locate your medical documents for the court filing. The technician straightened, startled. He said you needed help retrieving old records, the man muttered. A heat rose in my chest that wasn't anger alone. It was something older, rooted in the years I spent trying to give Emily stability after her mother died, years that suddenly meant nothing to the people standing in front of me. "Both of you need to leave," I said. "Now. Don't touch anything else." Derek gestured toward the computer. "This isn't what you think. We're just making sure the judge has the right information." The forced calm in his voice made my skin tighten. "You're breaking into my property," I replied. "Get out of my house." He exhaled sharply, but the technician spoke first. "Sir, I don't want trouble. I'll pack up." He unplugged the cable so fast the stool nearly tipped. Derek lingered, his jaw working as if he wanted to keep arguing. "You're acting unreasonable. If you cooperate, this process goes smoother." "Leave," I repeated. The technician pushed past him, carrying his equipment. Derek followed, muttering something under his breath. When he reached the driveway, he turned back. "You're making this worse for everyone." The door shut behind him, leaving a silence that pressed against my ribs. What unsettled me most wasn't the trespass itself, but the realization that this moment had been prepared. Emily and Derek weren't acting on impulse. They had built a story, rehearsed the lines, gathered allies. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily appeared. "Dad, stop escalating things. You're not well, and the court will see that. Don't make this harder. We're filing again tomorrow." A second bubble followed. "You need guidance. Let us help before this gets uglier." Those words struck deeper than the ones at the church. Guidance. Help. As if I'd become a burden living in the margins of my own life. A notification chimed from my work email before I could respond. Subject line: concerns regarding financial transparency. The message claimed my company had failed to report several transactions and suggested we were mismanaging funds. Anonymous, short, poisonous. A follow-up email from a long-term client arrived minutes later. "Given the questions surrounding your financial practices, we're pausing the upcoming project. Please clarify the situation before we continue." They didn't even bother to call. The ground I'd spent decades building suddenly felt loose under my feet. Evening settled as Marcus showed up at the doorstep. He didn't wait for an invitation, stepping in with an urgency I hadn't seen from him before. "Richard, things are moving fast," he said. "Emily and Derek have been contacting people around you. Neighbors, former co-workers, even your doctor's office. They're gathering statements to strengthen their petition." He dropped a folder on the counter. "That's what we know so far. You need counter-evidence. Dates, communications, your recent business performance, medical clearance, anything that shows capability." My shoulders pressed back against the wall. "How much are they trying to take?" "Everything. Control of assets, decision-making authority, possibly the business if they convince the court you're impaired." Marcus watched me closely. "We have to build a defensive timeline. Start tonight. I'll help if you want." Years of maintaining a steady life, paying bills on time, keeping my company afloat, raising Emily had never prepared me for this type of assault. The legal fight was one thing. The emotional demolition was another. A man can withstand pressure from strangers. Pressure from blood leaves cracks he doesn't notice until they're spreading. Marcus moved through the kitchen, gathering documents I'd set aside earlier. "You're not alone," he said. "But you can't let them write the narrative." That sentence lingered as he reviewed my accounts and drafted a checklist. We worked until he had to leave for his late shift, promising to return the next day with additional information the bank's investigators had gathered. The house felt smaller once he stepped out. Not unsafe, just invaded by the echoes of what had happened and what might come next. A weight settled at the base of my throat, the type that forms when someone realizes the people he trusted most have chosen a path that doesn't include him. I rose from the table, needing air. The mailbox sat at the end of the driveway, leaning slightly from years of weather and neglect. Something about checking it felt necessary, a final task before trying to sleep. A plain envelope rested among the bills. No name, no return address. Only a single sheet lay inside a full copy of my recent bank statement. Several expenses had been circled in red, each mark deliberate, almost surgical. Someone was tracking my spending line by line. Marcus arrived early the next morning, still in his work jacket, holding a thermos in one hand. I placed the anonymous envelope on the table between us. He scanned the first page, his brow tightening almost immediately. "This came from our internal system," he said. "Someone with clearance pulled it. This isn't something Emily could get on her own." He flipped the sheet again, tracing the red marks. "These highlights weren't done by the bank. Someone used our data and edited it afterward." A hollow feeling formed in my stomach. "So someone helped her," helped Derek, Marcus corrected. "I dug around last night. One of our junior analysts, Evan Murray, has been doing side jobs for Derek. Barely legal. Derek paid him to pull your records." That truth settled in slowly heavier with every passing second. A piece of me wanted to feel vindicated, but the relief only skimmed the surface. Beneath it sat the familiar question that kept rising throughout this ordeal. Where did I go wrong with Emily? Marcus read my face with too much accuracy. "Don't turn this on yourself," he said. "She made a choice. Derek made a bigger one. You didn't cause this." A buzz from my phone interrupted him. Another message from Emily, Dad. "Your behavior in the garage was alarming. We filed an emergency petition. Expect a welfare check soon. Don't be hostile when officers arrive." A second message came seconds later. "Stop resisting. We can take care of you if you let us." My hands tightened around the phone. The idea that she had interpreted my defense of my own property as instability twisted something in me. Before Marcus could respond, a sharp knock rattled the door. 2 officers stood on the porch. The older one stepped forward. "Mr. Hale, we received a welfare request concerning your mental and physical safety. We need to check in with you," Marcus whispered. "Stay calm. Say as little as possible." The officers walked through the main areas, asked a series of routine questions, and observed my responses. They didn't treat me as dangerous, just as someone who needed to be evaluated. It carried its own humiliation. When they finished, the younger officer spoke quietly. "You seem fine. We'll close the report. But you might want to sort things out with your family." After they left, Marcus shut the door and leaned against it. "They're escalating. Filing a second petition so soon means they think they've built momentum. My attorney Daniel called right after hearing from the officers. Richard, do not confront them. We have grounds to challenge everything, but reacting emotionally gives them ammunition." I sank into the nearest chair. "How do I fight people willing to twist every action I take with patience?" he said. "And proof. Let us construct the response." He walked me through the next steps, documenting the welfare check, saving every message, logging each intrusion. None of it eased the heaviness gathering across my chest. The constant sense of being watched, questioned, judged it all pressed in from every side. Their reach extended into the legal system, into my business, even into my medical history. My world had started collapsing in layers. Marcus sat across from me again once the call ended. "You're overwhelmed," he said. "Anyone would be. But listen, there's something in the new petition that doesn't add up." He pulled up a file on his phone. "Look here. Emily signed this document 2 days ago, claiming she submitted it in person at the courthouse that same afternoon. So her phone's GPS records tell a different story. I checked her initial request's timestamp. It's linked to data from one of our verification forms. She wasn't anywhere near the courthouse that day. For the first time in days, a small thread of hope tugged at me. Not victory, just the possibility that their story might unravel." "You're sure?" "Absolutely. She couldn't have filed that petition when she claimed. That means she either backdated the form or someone helped falsify the submission. My heartbeat steadied, though the confusion still layered beneath it. What do we do with it? Document it. Then let Daniel decide how to deploy it. But this could be the crack that breaks their case. It felt strange sensing a glimmer of advantage after so many blows. Almost frightening. A part of me resisted believing the tide could shift. Another part feared Emily's reaction if she realized the truth was slipping out of her control. Marcus placed his phone on the table. You're not losing this, Richard. Not if we stay methodical. The room settled into a stillness that didn't feel hostile, only suspended, waiting for whatever came next. The evidence on his screen glowed faintly, drawing my attention back to the inconsistency in the dates. Daniel called early the next day and asked me to meet him at his office. His tone carried a push I hadn't heard before. Richard, bring every file Marcus sent. We're moving forward. The moment I arrived, he spread a set of printouts across his desk, GPS logs, timestamp metadata, and a still frame from the church's outdoor camera. Look here, he said, tapping a line of numbers. Emily claimed she filed her petition at 3:17 p.m. in Mecklenburg Court. But at 3:17, her phone was pinging from the church parking lot across town. And this, he added, pointing to the image, shows her speaking with family members at that exact time. A steady pulse settled through me. So she couldn't have filed it when she said. Correct. Which means the entire submission is compromised. We're using this. He drafted a formal notice challenging her petition, then prepared a second document, one that surprised me. This requests an investigation into Emily and Derek for financial misconduct, fraudulent claims, and unlawful access to protected data. They crossed legal boundaries. You're entitled to a review. The shift felt strange. Instead of retreating or reacting, I simply watched Daniel type with calm intention. The part of me that once tried to protect Emily from every hardship stayed silent. Something else took its place, steady, measured, unwilling to be stepped on again. Marcus arrived midway through the meeting carrying a thumb drive. Got the audio you need, he said. And the statement from the analyst who confirmed Derek paid him. Daniel loaded the file and listened briefly. Derek's voice came through clearly. Just pull the statements. Do it. He won't know, and if he does, we'll handle it. No hesitation. No concern for legality. Only entitlement. Daniel stopped the recording. That's enough to request a formal inquiry. Let's use it carefully. By noon, the packets were ready to send one to the court, one to the bank's compliance team, one to the police. As they printed, Daniel turned to me. This is where momentum shifts. Remember, don't communicate with them directly. Any contact can be twisted. A text from an unfamiliar number arrived as if on cue. Derek Carter is requested to appear at the bank for review of account interactions. Immediate response required. I handed the phone to Marcus. They moved fast, he said. His loan applications will freeze until he explains himself. Word spread quickly. By late afternoon, rumors reached me through a mutual acquaintance. Derek's parents had confronted Emily, asking why the bank suddenly flagged their son's activities. She defended herself, but doubt had already settled in their voices. While the dust stirred around them, I met with a detective at the local precinct to hand over what we'd gathered. The audio file, the GPS logs, the falsified timeline. Everything pointed toward deliberate manipulation. The detective reviewed each item with care. This isn't a misunderstanding, he said. It's coordinated. We'll open a case. He paused before adding, Did you authorize any of them to act on your behalf? No. Then you've done exactly what you should bring it to us. Filing the report felt like placing a brick on solid ground after weeks spent standing on sand. Not triumph, but stability. That evening my phone rang repeatedly. Emily first, then Derek, then Emily again. None of the calls were answered. Each voicemail carried a different tone, fear, indignation, pleading, but not once did she acknowledge what she had done. She only insisted I was making everything worse. I let the messages stack. Sometimes silence is the only boundary that works. Later that night, Marcus stopped by. I heard something from the internal review team, he said. The analyst admitted everything. He confessed Derek paid him cash for your documents. Once the statement is finalized, the investigators will have what they need. He didn't sound triumphant, just relieved the truth was finally being pulled into daylight. We sat at the kitchen table going through the next steps when a knock echoed through the foyer. A uniformed officer greeted us with a sealed envelope. Mr. Hale, the court has issued a status update regarding the petition. I signed for it and opened it while Marcus waited. The message was brief due to ongoing inquiries into potential misconduct by petitioners Emily Carter and Derek Carter. The court hereby suspends all proceedings related to the request for guardianship or asset control. Further action is pending results of criminal and civil investigations. A slow breath left my chest. Not joy. Not anger. Just release the kind that comes when a weight you've carried too long finally loosens. Marcus gave a single nod. You're standing on firmer ground now. Yet even with that news, my thoughts drifted toward Emily, not with longing, but with the dull ache of someone recognizing the person he loved had chosen a path he couldn't follow. Daniel called minutes later. We expected this outcome. The court moves carefully when fraud is suspected. There's more to do, but this is a turning point. The house settled into a stillness that didn't feel hostile anymore. I placed the court notice on the table, letting the words blur slightly before refocusing. Daniel slid the final stack of documents toward me. These will close every access point, he said. Once you sign, neither Emily nor Derek can touch your account's medical files or property records again. A pen rested next to the signature page. My hand hovered before settling. Years of wanting to protect Emily. Years of stepping back so she wouldn't feel abandoned after losing her mother rose up like a tide. That instinct had shaped every decision I made as a parent. Yet it had given her the impression that my boundaries were optional. Daniel watched without pushing. You're not cutting her out of your life, he said. You're securing what needs to be secured. The pen moved, one signature then another, each line steady and controlled. When it was done, something in my chest loosened, not triumph, not anger, just clarity. The kind that arrives after you stop negotiating with a wound. Daniel gathered the papers. We'll file these today. The restrictions take effect immediately. During the drive home, a new email arrived from the bank. Subject notice of internal investigation. The message detailed formal inquiries into unauthorized data access involving Emily and Derek. Their names were spelled out plainly. No euphemisms, no soft language. Just the blunt weight of accountability. Another notification followed from a contact who worked in commercial lending. Derek's business proposal had been withdrawn. The funding partner pulled out overnight. With the bank review underway, no lender wanted involvement. His financial scaffolding was collapsing. Later that afternoon, a neighbor informed me that Derek's family had started distancing themselves, unsure what they'd been dragged into. That news didn't bring satisfaction. Only a steady understanding that consequences were unfolding on their own, without my interference. Near sunset, a familiar car pulled into my driveway. Emily stepped out slowly as if approaching a stranger's home. She stood by the porch steps until I opened the door. Her voice wavered. Dad? After the baptism, I should have told you what was going on. I know it looked harsh. I didn't mean for it to go this far. She kept talking words about stress misunderstandings, how Derek had urged her to take action, how she never intended real harm. None of it matched the petitions she'd filed or the lies she'd submitted. I listened because she was my daughter. Listening was the last piece of grace I had left to offer. But nothing she said acknowledged the truth, head on. No ownership, no recognition of the fear and humiliation she'd put me through. Only half-built explanations designed to rescue pieces of her image. When she finished, her eyes searched mine. "Can we fix this?" she asked. A long breath moved through me, one that carried years of love-grief and the final acceptance that I couldn't save her from choices she refused to see clearly. "I'm not discussing legal matters," I said. "You need to work through the investigators. Not harsh, not forgiving, just a simple boundary drawn with quiet resolve." She nodded slowly, as if absorbing the space that now existed between us, real, not symbolic. "Okay," she whispered, stepping back. Her car reversed down the driveway. The taillights faded, leaving the evening still. In the days that followed, I returned to my routines. Kept the company running with the accounts that remained active. Reorganized contracts, reassured employees. Not through grand speeches, but through steady tasks that rebuilt structure. Some mornings I left early to fish at Lake Norman, dropping a line in the water without any goal other than letting my thoughts settle. Other afternoons I joined a beginner's hiking group for adults, moving up gentle inclines with strangers who shared nothing of my life, but kept pace without asking questions. It wasn't escape, it was continuity. Life finding its shape again. One Thursday, Daniel called to say the final confirmation was ready for pickup. "All protections are locked in," he said. "You're fully secured." I drove to his office, signed the last acknowledgement, and accepted the stamped envelope he handed me. The weight of the document felt different from everything else I'd held over the past weeks. Not a shield, not a weapon, just a line drawn firmly in the sand. Walking out of the office building, I tucked the envelope under my arm and headed toward the street. Cars moved past each one, carrying someone absorbed in their own battles. My own steps found a steady rhythm, unhurried, not pressed from behind anymore. The papers rustled lightly as I adjusted my grip, and the door closed behind me while I kept moving forward.